The question of do we have an accurate copy is something that I wrestled with a lot. One of the claims was like, we can't possibly know what the original authors wrote because we don't even have an accurate copy. There's just hundreds of thousands of mistakes, I was told. So this is something I really dug into. Like, forget the question, are they even telling the truth? Or are the facts that they recorded reliable? Like, is this even what we think it is? And so I discovered that there's a science called textual criticism. It's a science that scholars use to determine the original wording of a document when we no longer have the original. This is how we know what Shakespeare wrote. This is how we know what the Gettysburg Address said. This is how we reconstruct the writings of Aristotle and Socrates. And so essentially how it works is when you have different hand-copied manuscripts of an original text, you take those manuscripts and you compare them with one another. And to do good textual criticism, you want a lot of manuscripts. You want as many as you can possibly find. And then you also want really early manuscripts. You want them to be as close to the original as possible. And what we discover with the New Testament is really quite stunning. We have a conservative estimate would be over 5,000 manuscripts of the New Testament. And a manuscript can be anything from a little fragment that's the size of a postage stamp to an entire book. But what really stood out to me is when it was presented to me, oh, there's 100,000 mistakes. What that really means is there are hundreds of thousands of variations between the manuscripts. Why is there so many? Because there's over 5,000 manuscripts. There's going to be a lot of variations. But here's the thing that just struck me. The vast majority of these differences don't affect the meaning of the text. Maybe one manuscript says Jesus Christ and the other says Christ Jesus. Or you have a word that's spelled in a different way. So there is a small percentage of those differences that do affect the meaning. One example is there's a famous verse in the Bible where the disciples, they're trying to cast demons out of this guy. They go to Jesus, say, we can't do it. And Jesus says, this kind only comes out by prayer. And then other versions of the Bible say this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. So that's a variation that affects the meaning. But even when you take the small percentage of those, there's not one of those that would call into question any core Christian doctrine that defines what the gospel is. Not one. There's not one of those meaningful differences that's going to refute the resurrection or refute Jesus being God. So when we look at the vast majority of these differences in the manuscripts, yes, there are a lot, but for the New Testament, we have more manuscripts to verify the original wording of the New Testament than any other work of ancient literature.